Okay. So, welcome everyone. This is Ravi Shankar here. Welcome to the 10th edition of ISOBERAK. Little did we realize when we got going last March that we would still be dealing with so many pandemics around the world, and yet here we are. But this has been a real lifeline. And so to reach 10 editions, and you can see all of the old readings archived on YouTube. ISOBERAK is a co-production of the New York Writers Workshop and the Asian
Uh-oh.
from around the world. Oh, okay. There was a little jump there. We're going to get going today, and I'm going to introduce all of the readers, and then we'll have a chance for Q&A, and all of these events will be archived on YouTube. So it is great to see everyone. I was just saying, and we were just hearing from everyone, this is really representative of the kind of endeavor that APWT, if you don't know the organization, likes to put together, which is we really have writers from around the world represented. So we have Narissa from the Philippines, Kyoko's from coming in from Kyoto, Japan, Edwin from Malaysia, and Dr. Shankar Brown and Jazz from Florida. I'm here in Providence, and so the beauty of being able to connect online perhaps mitigates some of not being able to be together in person. So welcome everyone. I see some people are coming in online, and we'll give it 1 second here. And I'm going to introduce our first reader who's coming in from Malaysia. It's very early. What time of morning is it, Edwin?
Well, just past 8 in the morning, 8:02.
Okay. So 8:02 in the morning. Edwin, we're very lucky to have Malachi Edwin Vetamani. He's a poet, a writer, editor, and critic. And his latest books include edited volume of Malaysian poems, just out this year. And I hope we'll talk about this in the Q&A, Malaysian Millennial Voices with young Malaysian writers. And he has also edited 2 volumes of Malaysian writings, which cover a period of over 60 years, the Malacan Testament, Malaysian poems. His poem won actually the Malaysian Book Award in 2020 in the English language category. Edwin also is a great lover and collaborator with musicians, and we're actually going to be lucky enough to see one of his poems that was set to music by Malaysian jazz musician Taysher Sang and premiered at the Malaysian Jazz Festival. He's also the founding editor of the recently launched Men Matters online journal and emeritus professor with the University of Nottingham and former head of school at the Faculty of Arts and Sciences at University of Nottingham, Malaysia. So it's wonderful to have you, Edwin. And let's begin. And do you want to just contextualize this little clip here that we're
Right.
going to...
What happened was, when the pandemic started, one of my friends, Gareth Ismail, started posting paintings and poems which dealt with loneliness. And he posted one of my poems, Solitudes from Life Happens. And Tay Chi Siang actually read this poem, and he said he was able to put it to music. He was very moved by the poem. And so that poem then became a song which was performed at the Malaysian Jazz Festival last year.
Great. So let me, I'll play this. Hopefully everyone will be able to. Let me begin it. Okay.
A stillness, a silence, no shadows, no echoes, a lightness, a strength, no expectations, no regrets, a hold, a release, no sighs, no surrender, a calmness, a sedateness, no hunger, no desire.
All right, that was wonderful, Edwin. Thank you so much. And so with that, the stage is yours. Please take it away.
Cheers. Thank you, Ravi. I'm going to read a few of my poems. The first poem I'm going to read is from this collection that came out, was put together by Sharmini Flint, and it's called Unmasked, and Reflections on Virus Times is the title that goes with this collection. I'm going to read one of the first poems that I wrote during this time of pandemic. It's called Lockdown Afternoon Rain. Lockdown Afternoon Rain for Julian. The afternoon rains arrive, no thunder, no lightning. The smell of water on dry earth. Memories of paper boats sailing on drains skirting our kampung homes. Now I watch alone, homebound. An order keeps me within these walls in the company of the pitter-patter of drops from the skies. At a distance, the muezzin calls devotees for Zohar prayers. Thank you. The next few poems I will read from my other collection. The first, I'm going to be reading from Complicated Lies, my first collection of poems that came out in 2016. This poem is about my village where I grew in brickfields in Kuala Lumpur, and much of brickfields is now lost, and I miss brickfields, and I wanted to put this in a poem, especially to capture that which has now been lost, and very much for Malaysians, and of course around the world. Still brickfields. On brickfields' old pavements now stand concrete, colorful arches, trying to give a semblance of an Indian enclave it once was. Buildings rise and spring at me. These monsters have devoured my playgrounds and past. My childhood church no longer stands alone, now surrounded by brothels and massage parlors. Yet I still see my city's house, its huge garden of banana trees, playing with my cousins amidst the chickens and ducks. I still hear the sounds of the ice cream man's bicycle bell. The roti man's blaring horn will follow. The Scott Road Hindu temple still stands but stripped of its peacock pan and rain trees. The riverbank is concrete. the lalang and weeds gone. The river wears a monsoon rain mask. There I once caught fish and saw floating corpses during the May riots that undid us. One by one, we were torn away. But then the big floods came and sealed our fate. Now we return like tourists with our children. They wander on these small spaces we once called home. This is my brickfields, never central. I'll read 3 poems from my second collection called Life Happens. This is a series of poems I wrote. Actually, I wrote them for Shudit Sen. And there are 7 poems in this series. I will read the first 3. Amidst the silences. Silences we live by. It's another Monday morning. You've returned, as you always do. You tell me your stories, those you want me to hear. But between the stories, I hear the silences, the stories you don't share. Those silences are yours and his stories. Does he hear our silences? The second poem, Your Silences. Your silences cut deeper than words, tear me apart, bleed me, drain my life, flow over me, drown me with each wave of nothingness. Finally, speak of now. Speak of today. Speak of now. Silence on tomorrow. Silence on forever. Fragrance of this morning's flower fades with each passing hour. There's no assurance the next bud will bloom. Something a bit more fun. I'm going to read to you a poem I wrote while I was in Brisbane in my friend's home. And I guess it's quite appropriate since it's morning here in Kuala Lumpur. Brisbane daybreak. An orchestra of bird songs brightens the break of day. The sky unadorned in turquoise blue. The clouds still in their beds, away and afar. The sun unrivaled reigns over all on this crisp, cold morning. And torn between the sweetness of sunlight and the chilling fresh morning breeze, then the fragrance of freshly brewed coffee fills the house. The dogs bring their greetings. I'm awake as is the morning. The birds continue their relentless chirping from the neighbor's tree. A sudden cawing, then an eerie silence. Thank you. The final poem that I'll read is one that was published last year by Kitab in Singapore. Again, this is a poem that I wrote during the early days of the pandemic. It's entitled Reading Tennyson on Pandemic Days. A deadly number game has befallen us. We keep count like never before. Why are we weighed upon with heaviness and utterly consumed with sharp distress? 0. No business, cash registers forcibly close. Someone has blundered. 1. A meter away, close proximity frowned on. The day to night, the night to morn, and day and night I am left alone. 2. Couples self-isolate, prescribed companionship. And when I raised my eyes above, they met with two so full and bright, such eyes, I swear to you, my love, that these have never lost their light. 14. Days of self-isolation, thoughts of self and others. For every worm beneath the moon draws different threads, and late and soon spins, toiling out his own cocoon. 17. Mark this date in November 2019. Dark clouds released upon us. Cursed be the social lives that warp us from the living truth. 19. That dastardly coronavirus of fevers, breathlessness, and dying. You must be gone, said Death. These walks are mine. 20. Seconds of hopeful hand washing, seconds to hold your breath. Behold, we know nothing, and I can but trust that good shall fall at last, far off at last to all, and every winter change to spring. 30. Lockdown days crying out for more. The tender grace of a day that is dead will never come back to me. 37. The norm in centigrade, the bar best not to cross. The heart will cease to beat, for all things must die. 0. The number of dead we want, light a distance away. To strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. Thank you. Thank you, Ravi.
Thank you so much, Edwin. That was great. The echo of Winston Churchill there at the end. And we'll hear from Edwin again. Hope to hear about his projects, especially about the millennial Malaysian youth. So thank you all. For those of you that are just joining us, I'm Ravi Shankar. This is ISOBEREAK, the International Reading Series, which is a co-production of the New York Writers Workshop and the Asia Pacific Writers and Translators. And it brings together voices really from around the world. And I'm very excited to introduce our next reader, who is coming to us from the Philippines. And Narissa del Carmen Guerra finished her MA in creative writing at the UP Diliman. And she has taught and published widely. She received a Palencia Award for poetry. And also she's a dancer. So she won a Silver Cup Award for dance solo in the April Spring Festival. And she has put together a book and CD project, special citation for Best Secular Album. She also teaches literature and creative writing at the University of Santo Tomas, Faculty of Arts and Letters, and for many years has run a poetry workshop called the Baguio Soul Project, Journey into the Self Through Words. And I have a feeling that this bio is a little out of date, and I think that there are things that Carmen's been doing, and that Narissa's been doing that she can tell us about even more. But it's wonderful to have you. Thank you, Narissa.
Thank you for your invitation here to ISOBEREAK, and it's just wonderful to be here, especially because we're all staying in place right now. My thoughts lately for the year that has passed, including our extension of this pandemic times, especially in our country. My thoughts run through, while staying in place, the thought of natural disasters and also national disasters. So I'll be reading 3 poems that go along those lines. My first poem was published very recently in the Annie 41, a CCP journal. It's called Chicken Little. Chicken Little. Shelter is one's hands over one's head, the rain seeping through everything. What changes the landscape of our lives? Invisible things can kill. There are chasms where once stood hills. What crumbles to dust aside from the limestone rubble of a church that stood by a tree? Everything. It is no light matter to be disowned by the very ground that held you up. It is no light matter, the ground, the trees, the ocean's froth. It is no light matter, the cliffs, the highway, the clouds over the sugarcane fields. It is no light matter, the shrimp jumping in the fisheries, their golden sheen on the brown water. It is no light matter, the plaza, the cathedral on the tip of its tongue. Buang, swimming naked in the fountain, dreaming of God. It is no light matter, the hot springs in Mambukal and their sulfur ghosts. It is no light matter, the waterfalls and their eternal freshwater longing. It is no light matter, the lightness of salt on the breeze blowing through everything, and its taste shattering the world as you know it. It is no light matter, the house, the pelota courts, mother in her white skirt, mother of one and one to come, not too old, not too young. It is no light matter, Yaya speaking in tongues, and the aswang sitting on the coconut tree in front of the garden grinning. It is no light matter, love and grief. It is no light matter, the way the blue sky remains blue while the birds are flying, and then the ground gives up on the world, groans, gives up, shifts to its side like a father that does not want to be bothered in his sleep, not even by a small hand with a fleshy flower from the yard. Father, do not turn your back on me. Wake up. The sky is falling, little chick. The sky is falling. That was based on a little fairy tale we know called Chicken Little. There was a game that I had invented with my sister, which we played when we rode out typhoons. And it's a very morbid game, but it kept us preoccupied as the typhoon would rage over us. It's called Coffin Coffin. Sister pushes a stuffed elephant into the dark to ward off disaster. The wind howls blue through the jalousies and turns the room into a flute. Sister sits pink in her fear and I embrace her with mine. What is love? What is the red mouth of disaster? I invented this game to wish you gone. We parted the beds and I told you to lie still in the space between them. I covered you up with pillows then smoothened the blanket on your grave. I prayed for your peace, for the angels to take you to heaven, for God to give you chocolates. You giggled as I prayed, and I said sternly, the dead do not giggle. You popped out, none the worse for wear, and I took your place. Under the pillow soil, the world is muffled in a cottony place. I lay stiff and serious, the way I had seen the dead lie among the flowers. I held my breath as long as I could. Thank you. It's Pride Month, so happy Pride for everyone. I am currently the director of a project of Global Grace Philippines called AIR, and I want to greet the entire team, including our 15 talented residents who might be watching right now, a happy Pride. Even in the midst of the pandemic, we are together, even if we are apart. And I dedicate this to them. It's called Fall. Fall. How lovely to imagine the fall. In many ways, how true that word for the season, and how the Bible has it on its very first chapter, only beginning, but already there. How things fall. The last act of grace. Leaves, bright red and postcards, before everything dissolves into whatever it will become. For now, sit. We fell into the sheets, speaking in tongues, each other's names, at the height of something almost real, and clenched between wrists and fists the shudder and the wave of heat. What dissipates is not fire, but what we cannot be named. What rolls away, a fruit, a whisper. It is still summer. The trees green and seemingly never ending. Run your fingers through my hair and tell me how the Bible calls us sinners of the most abominable form. Push into me with your words. Hold, right there, the point of breaking. Open. I want to pay more attention to the rain, the leaves on trees, the leaves off trees, the light changing behind the clouds. I want to pay attention to every other thing like it never happened, like maybe it is only all just about to happen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Narissa. That was beautiful. All right. Welcome, everyone. If you're just joining us, I'm Ravi Shankar. This is ISOBERAK number 10, a joint between the New York Writers Workshop and the Asia Pacific Writers and Translators. A couple of things I should mention. The New York Writers Workshop has just started Lunch Poems, Lunch Prose, which comes out of Frank O'Hara, if you know the great New York School poet who used to compose poems when he worked as at the Museum of Modern Art on his way to lunch. And so for just 50 minutes a day, you'll get some craft talk and some generative exercise to help you better digest your lunch. So that's happening now. And the APWT has had a couple of publishing endeavors. Meridian, The first anthology of Asia Pacific writing is out with small press distribution. And there is a new folio with Jiao Rock Review, Asia Pacific of the Mind, that you can find online as well. So welcome all. We're going to keep going here with ISOBEREAK. What a wonderful beginning. Thank you, Edwin and Narissa. And next up, we have Kyoko. And Kyoko Yoshida is the author of Disorientalism and Spring Sleepers. And she also translates Japanese poetry and drama into English and English fiction into Japanese. And her most recent story, Going to Meet the Dogs, has appeared in La Mer Gelée in a French translation. And she also has an interview I think she'll tell us about that's coming out with the Japan Society with a Japanese writer. So thank you so much for being here with us, Kyoko. And we look forward to hearing your new work.
Thank you, Ravi. Thank you, APWT, Asia Pacific Writers and Translators, and thank you, New York Writers Workshop, for organizing this and keep doing it. This means so much for many of us who write away from each other. Before I get into the reading, I'd like to share the information about Japan Foundation New York's literary series. So JFNY literary series, Japan Foundation New York, with the group, the translators collective called Strong Women Soft Power, organized a series of interviews of upcoming Japanese female authors who are getting translated into English. And I've just interviewed the writer Hiroko Oyamada, and this video should be coming out in 2 weeks, but already there are 3 videos up on the web. So writers such as the Sayaka and writers who got translated recently into English will be speaking about their work and craft with translators. So this is great because both translators and writers will be appearing. Okay, so I'm going to read today the part of the story that Ravi just mentioned, Going to Meet the Dogs, which appeared in the French journal La Mer Gelée. The theme of that issue was the cold. And these stories, which I will share in English for the first time, is based on Antarctic expedition in 1911 to 1912 by Shirase Nobu, the Japanese explorer. Shirase brought with him 2 Ainu dog keepers along with couple of dozens of dogs who died before they even reached the Antarctica. So the story is based on that. And there are references to dogs in the story. Sometimes they're called karafuto inu in Japanese, or sometimes they're called sakarin laika, but they're basically the same type of dogs. And dogs have been indispensable for Arctic expeditions, but today dogs are entirely banned for ecological reasons from Antarctica. Okay, so Going to Meet the Dogs. 1. Yayomaneku and Sisiratoka and Seta resumed their journey home from the Ueno terminal after Captain Shirase's expedition went their separate ways in Tokyo. After 3 years in the sea and ice floes, their feet feel still unsure. They have not seen so many human beings in one place that they feel dizzy. The weather feels strange too, since monsoon is something they have not grown up with. It is like the air is too hot and heavy to float in the sky, so it has decided to become rain and fall. They're going to take a night train across the eastern Japan all the way to the northern tip of Aomori. From there, they will take a ferry boat to Hokkaido. From there, another train across the northern island to its northern tip and another boat to Sakhalin. And from there, they will walk home. The three show up for the train that Mr. Tada has booked for them. The conductor on the platform stops the three from the distance and rushes, telling them to get off the car. Animals are not allowed on the passenger coach. You must leave the dogs. At this, Yayomaneku and Sisiratoka, both fully bearded men, make grimaces like they are about to cry. The three appear otherworldly in the city, dashing into modernity. The two sturdy men are severely sunburned, and their skin is peeling on their noses. And the dog has a face of a conscious being who could voice her opinion if she was asked to. She has very dense fur in the biscuit colors and unbelievably meaty paws like a panther's. The conductor feels he has trespassed on another time and place that he doesn't belong to. They all stand there, the four of them, in desperate silence. 4 months ago, Yayomaneku and Sisiratoka swore that from then on, they would always stay with their dogs, no matter what happened. And this already. You must leave the dogs. You must leave the dogs. We shall not separate from this one, Sisiratoka nods at Seta. It is not an opinion, it is a declaration. Seta is panting heavily, her tongue dangling limp. The conductor doesn't have a heart to drag them off the car and walks away. They refuse to be separated. Yet the rule is a rule. He reluctantly suggests that they pack their dog in a cage and put it separately in a freight car. Sisiratoka immediately pulls the leash closer to his body. No, we shall not be separated. We will travel in the same freight car together. So, that's what they will do. The conductor takes them to the end of the train where freight cars are linked. Yayomaneku and Sisiratoka spread their furry bedrolls between crate boxes. The conductor lets Seta stay with the two without the cage. He brings them 2 small ceramic bowls and a bucket of water and makes sure the party is settled. Then the sliding door roars shut, and the three are in the complete darkness. They hear the conductor's voice. He won't lock the door, so they need to be careful. After giving water to the dog-tired Seta, Yayomaneku and Sisiratoka fall asleep on their bedrolls. The train rattles over the Kanto plain, across the rivers, Arakawa, Edogawa, Tonegawa. Half asleep, Sisiratoka hears rainfalls tapping on her roof, on and off. The freight car rumbles its body as it breathes heavily, inhaling and exhaling, inhaling and exhaling. Sisiratoka feels in his sleep the 4 walls slowly inflate and deflate like an old animal. Perhaps it is Yayomaneku snoring, or perhaps the other dogs are back, all 23 of them, to join Seta's journey back home. The air inside the car is heavy, dense, and warm like their double-coated furs. The room turns rank with dog breath. Kainamaru always smelled of fish. The sail ship was converted from a fishing vessel. In the first journey, 26 men and 26 Karafto Inu and a cat and a pig jostled each other in a small ship. The crew built large crate boxes, not unlike these freight crates surrounding the 3 now. 2 of them contained 10 dogs and 1 6. Their lids were kept open and they were laid sideways on the forecastle deck. The dogs suffered from the heat. The kennels were their only shade in the ocean, and they died one by one, perhaps from some parasites or food poisoning. And by the time they reached the shelf ice, they were all gone but one. Kinugawa, Nakagawa, Abukumagawa. We must not leave the dogs. We will not leave without dogs. Their penchant for being fed on salmon has once put them on the verge of extinction. The economist calculated that suckling like us ate up to 4,000 tons of salmon a year, fish that could have been exported otherwise. No labor force would worth that much cost, however expert it might be, even if they could sledge a heavy load and manage to cross the Tatarsky Strait through the deadly blizzard. Production would be mechanized and modernized and economized. A massive firing of suckling like us took place. The management put cubes of seal blubber in a neat row outside the kennels, and when the Lycas came back from the day's work and rushed to the half-frozen dinner, the squad fired at them from behind. They weren't fed on salmon at their retirement. Soon the management figured the ammunition amounted to much, so they laced the seal blubber with arsenic. That went on for a while, but a report was filed from the waste management department that their section was actually losing money because they could not sell the Leica skin to the fur trading section anymore. So they went back to the ammunition. By the time when the management cut down the labor force to the last 11, the top management had been all replaced anew and nobody recalled the sense of urgency that prompted this reduction. Look how much fortune we could make by shooting the Lycas and selling the salmon. Perhaps salmon wasn't fashionable anymore in the rest of the world. A party of high-rank emissaries dispatched to the continent on a horse sleigh never returned, and the Lycas have become once again a life-saving force in Sakhalin. The 11 surviving Sakhalin Lycas are now paid with seal bladder cubes, but it is barely enough. Thrifty ones would barter their seal blubber for seal balls. Seal blubber is the gold standard of the Lyca economy. Cubes are 100% pure fat, and 30 cubic centimeter of blubber can be bartered for 100 grams of seal balls, which are supposed to be made of scrap pieces of meat and blubber mixed with flour. But no one is really sure what they are made of exactly because they are manufactured in a factory. Their ingredients protected by the patent, of course, and the majority of the seal ball manufacturer's share is owned by the management. The seal balls fill the Lyca's bellies, but they make Lycas fart. So one can tell which ones are thrifty Lycas by sniffing around the kennels, which are majority of the remaining 11 because, of course, the management has spared all stereotypes. There are few rogue Lycas left because their performance in the worst weather conditions has excelled. They refuse to eat seal balls. Every Friday, as soon as they receive their week's wage of seal blubber, they dash to the Nivke fishing village and barter their blubber for all the fresh salmon they can get their paws on. After this binge eating, they go stone broke. So they try to survive for the rest of the week, feeding on seal dunks and small frozen fish found in the ice and snow. They're always sniffing around, sticking their nozzles in the snow. When they raise their head from the snow, they grin a big grin, showing their sharp fangs, 20, 30, just too many of them, scary number of fangs, which are in fact white thin icicles fringing their chin and whiskers. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyoko. Wonderful. And tell us again, where was that story? It's in a French journal?
French journal called La Mer Gelée.
La Mer Gelée.
Mhm.
The Frozen Sea.
Yes. And yeah. And it's a journal that introduces writers in different languages.
Wonderful. Okay, so hopefully we will hear more about that. We have a couple more readers to go. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Ravi Shankar. This is ISOBEREAK, the 10th edition. We've been going for about a year. New York Writers Workshop and Asia Pacific Writers and Translators co-production. And I'm very excited next up to have a friend and someone who I admire a lot, Jaswinder Bolina, who, in case he's reading at a very silent pitch, it's because he has a young child next door. But he's the author of full-length poetry collection, The 44th of July, Phantom Camera, and Carrier Wave, and the digital chapbook, The Tallest Building in America, and his debut collection of essays Of Color, which is excellent. I've taught from it before. It was just released by McSweeney's last year in 2020, and he's on the faculty of the MFA program in creative writing at the University of Miami and working on his next book of poems. And I think we might hear a couple new poems today. So Jazz, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Hopefully you can all hear me. I'm trying to speak at a kind of normal voice, as you might have noticed with the baby monitor right there. My office shares a wall with my 2.5-year-old's office. And so it's downtime for him, and hopefully it'll stay that way. So I'm going to read just 4 poems, and I want to first thank all the other readers. Truly wonderful work, and so kind of it feels global. I think Narissa was just saying in the chat, it feels like in this moment we're in Antarctica somehow, and while one of us is in the Philippines and another in Japan and another in Malaysia, and funnily enough, it is exactly 12 hours. It is 8:48 here. So Edwin, we're on the other side of the planet from each other, which is kind of an amazing, extraordinary thing. So for all the horrible things that have been happening the last year, this is wonderful that we've had this technology and these opportunities to read with folks we wouldn't get a chance to read with, and with audiences. So thank you to all of you out there. I'm just going to read 4 poems, I think, from the new book that I think just finished. It's a book of poems whose title is English as a Second Language and Other Poems. So I'm going to start by reading the title poem, English as a Second Language. It is based on a true story, not my story, but a story my father has told me. At least it's inspired by that story. So it's called English as a Second Language. We came upon a line of English, eating dog, we thought, on plump bread, steamed and slathered in a drab yellow chutney from a cart in the Kew Gardens. Wankers they looked to us, offending nature, but we asked the dogwalla for one apiece, me, your Gyan uncle, and the elder Sahota, who held up 7 fingers, then pointed to the sky. A code of theirs he'd broken. The dogwalla just shook his head, counted our shillings, and surrendered 3 green glass bottles of 7-Up, 3 warm logs of aluminium. In 1967, you could hear a song by the Beatles on anybody's radio. But what did the Beatles know about us, huddled together in that conspiracy on a bench beneath a kind of tree I'd never seen before? Anyway, we were young and having fun, the shit-eating grin on Gyan's face as we brought the dogs to our mouths. When you sack the wanker's estate, you have to eat from the wanker's kitchen. You dress in his topcoat and drink his gin. You set his horses free and drive them home through the rain. You see, we weren't afraid. We didn't come here to become like them. We came here to plunder. That was a story about the first time my father ate a hot dog, which he has told many times, and he has told me about how he truly thought he was eating dog, which was not comfortable, but everybody else was doing it, so they tried it. From that poem, I'm going to read, kind of just reading a little bit in order, I guess. And based on time, I may be able to read a fifth poem. Just I've never read these poems out loud, just maybe one other time. So I don't know how long they take me. So I'm just kind of glancing at the clock and seeing how much time I have. So 4, maybe 5. But this is a poem called Americanistan. At sunup, the yard rakes assembled into ranks and files upon the common. Their rusting green tines combed back, slickened with dew. Here they would harden a front against the encroach of the leaf blowers and riding mowers, hickory bodies stiff in the democratic wind. School kids in uniform blues peered through windows of their ugly yellow transports. The garages gaped open, stuffed with croquet mallets, red metal gas canisters, hyper-realistic Christmas statuary, a pint of Cutty Sark embedded deep undercover in the box of lawn darts beside the black magi. A reveille of zoos and zas revved up across the hashtag architecture of suburbia. If you're not angry, you're not paying attention, hollered a passing tote bag. If you want peace, work for justice, grumbled the bumper sticker on a Cherokee. 4 more years, chanted the placard, leading a contrail of mentholated smoke past the VFW. From the courthouse portico, I could see a leaf rip its static line free of a Dutch elm, its jagged brown descent caught in the twitchy jurisdiction of a red light camera. Thus began its hopeful mission to the surface. The others would follow. I guess I'll say that's based on a true story, too, of autumn in a small town somewhere. So I'm going to read, this is, many of you are translators and know far more languages than I do, so I'm going to read this next poem, which includes some of my terrible Italian. It too, I guess this is a weird book for me in which many of the poems are based on actual events. So this, I wrote this poem after being in Italy with my wife, who was then pregnant, early in her pregnancy, with the aforementioned 2.5-year-old. And we were in Italy when the televangelist Billy Graham died. And I myself did not experience a great deal of sorrow over that, but I'm sure others did. In fact, it seemed a lot of people did. And I wrote this poem called The Billy Graham Elegy. And it was inspired by something my wife actually said, which is basically the first line of the poem. The Billy Graham Elegy. Nobody much mentions the floor of the Sistine Chapel that's touched so many more than the docents or the ceiling or the premonitions on the wall. Come papal loafer and heathen sneaker. Come ked and echo mingling dog shit off the Viale Estrada. On this scuffed stone, nobody mentions much as the tourist kids keep calling it the 16 Chapel, as if it's one more middling outlet in a protracted franchise, which it is, which must be why the Lord doesn't appear here much more than elsewhere, retired as he must be to Ostia, as is custom among Romans. One can't, after all, be Messiah forever. Eventually, the ball club needs a fresh message, a fresher messenger, a body in a silk suit maybe, a Carolina drawl, maybe another mother-appointed chairwoman of the Pietà. But we don't think much of home among the Alfa Romeos of the military police, here where we're unafraid anyone will shoot us. And Rome feels almost comprehensible. I know how to say vorrei 2 cornetti, or mia moglie è incinta, or dove il bancomat. O troppo moneta for once in our lives, and the taxi drivers of evening tell me, your Italian is so good, where do you come from? But the taxi drivers of morning say, your Italian is so bad, di dove sei? And I don't tell either, we're from the outcome, a new world and latter result. That all this artistry ends in half a nation mourning a holy mogul in a circus tent. And mercifully, nobody there comes back from the dead. So I'm just going to read, I think I can squeeze 2 more poems in. So I hadn't intended on reading this one, but because others have read poems written in quarantine and during this last year of pandemic, I'm going to read a poem that I wrote at the very, very beginning, back in February, when I was seeing reports out of China and getting very nervous about what might be coming. And this is not entirely a true story because my son is far too young to have had these questions or this conversation with me, but I was kind of imagining sort of him a little bit older or some version of a slightly older child asking about things. So the poem is called The Plague on TV. The kid keeps asking if there are rhetorical questions in the afterlife. And does the little voice go on chattering inside the headless? In whose language? Do the gods pray to each other? What do they ask for? What do they offer to sacrifice? It's the 29th of February, a cicada droning on the sill and a plague on TV and the kid going on and on. But it feels good to sit here buzzing inside myself, watching TV at the odd end of Florida, February, a cicada moaning on the sill and a plague on and the kid going on and on. So I go on debating with myself whether it'd be better to die of the plague or to die of anything other than the plague during a plague. And I begin getting nervous for the kid and myself as remembered by the kid riding shotgun in the lead car behind my hearse. And I begin to wonder how long I'll miss the view from inside my own head in any kind of afterlife, of the other side of my face, of the kid as seen through my face, of TV and the cicada like a little winged ambulance bawling on the sill, purpling with dusk, meaning my view of everything. I keep asking and asking, but the kid's decamped to his bunk. The cicada receded into the soft quarantine of night. And the TV is talking to itself again, and the plague is there, making its gross calculations like a god sizing up a lamb. And so I'm going to end with the last poem in this manuscript, which I think is pretty self-explanatory, and yes, it is indeed based on a true-ish story. It's called Lines Composed Upon Changing a Diaper. Marion upstairs is anxious for an update from the extended care facility where her husband is dying. 4 blue macaws bustle through the airspace above the neighborhood. Her footfalls go cursing from room to room. Here, the toddler testifies no poops, but the toddler is lying. I tell him there are 9 spiders living inside the walls for every person in a building. They spin their twilit colonies in an alternate dimension rippling beneath the drywall. Termites romancing in the joists. We worry about so much more than ourselves, I tell him, but I tell him it'll all be all right. Because it'll all be all right, though not all of us will live long enough to agree. One night, we hear Marion's husband has broken back into himself through a skylight in his mind, demanding to see his wife again, demanding the nurses release him again, demanding a Reuben from a diner in Brooklyn that folded in 1996. But by morning, he's ghosted back into his framework. From the interior view, birth is exactly as inevitable as death. I can't sketch the schematics of why, baby, but I remain devoted to my tasks, wiping you clean, buttoning you up, answering your every complaint in a grammar you don't understand. Thank you.
Well, great. Thank you, Jazz. I was just looking at Byron's lines inscribed upon a cup formed from a skull, and here are lines composed from the changing of a diaper. So wonderful. And I didn't know your Italian was so good. Wow.
No, I don't. It's not good. It's not. Let's not spread that
Yeah,
around.
I don't speak it, so yes, don't.
Well, yeah. Anybody in the audience who does will be like, that wasn't great, but I try.
All right. Welcome those of you that are just joining us. We're right at the tail end of ISOBEREAK number 10. What a wonderful journey it's been. From Edwin's poems to Narissa to Kyoko's short story about the dogs in Antarctica and jazz. And we have our last reader today. And often when I'm asked about APWT, there are a lot of American writers who are members of AWP, which is a large writing conference. And I kind of think of APWT as a microcosm, a much smaller version, but it's really like family. There is this really kind of deep connection between the people that attend these conferences, which hopefully was supposed to be in Bangalore this year. Hopefully next year we will be able to attend, but moves around Asia. And then, of course, we have this kind of virtual connection. And so it's only appropriate that the next reader actually is a member of my own family. And so I'm very excited to have my sister, Dr. Rajani Shankar Brown. She's a professor and Jesse Ball DuPont Endowed Chair of Social Justice at Stetson University. She's a social justice activist and founder and director for the Poverty and Homelessness Conference at her school. She has published and done a lot of advocacy, but I'm going to concentrate on her poetry today because she has a new book of poems that just came out last year called Toluminous. And I hope you will tell us, Gigi, how, and she's my sister, so I call her Gigi, how to get that book. And she has that book, which was called A Marvelous, Meaningful Testimony of the Power of Language to Heal and Transform, by Richard Blanco, who was President Obama's inaugural poet. And she was also described as the Poet Laureate of the Just Society by NYU's Moral Courage Project founder, Irshad Manji. And she's won numerous teaching awards, recipient of an Engaged Scholarship Faculty Award, and a devoted mother and sister, in addition to being a passionate teacher scholar. And so it's wonderful to have you, Gigi. The stage is yours. Please tell us about Toluminous and take it away.
Thank you. And I also, thanks to my big brother, I also have the honor of being an aunt as well. So being a mom and aunt are two of my best roles. Toluminous, I'm very thankful, Tim Tomlinson with the New York Writers Group, my big brother, so many supporters really helped me and encouraged me to start to share my poems, something that I've always written, kept journals since I was a young girl, a real way for me in terms of healing, in terms of dealing with various traumas. The arts as a whole, whether it was picking up a paintbrush or a pen, has been one way I've been able to stay resilient. But also, I feel like especially I want to model that for our youth, that they can find agency, especially through writing. So I really am excited to share my collection of poetry, which is rooted in social justice, and also just our shared humanity, the global love, I think that we're feeling here tonight as well. And I'll just share that all of the proceeds for this book are going towards helping with projects for youth in homelessness and the arts. So if you're interested, you can access it through my website as well. And I'm just so grateful for all the support. And so tonight I picked out a few poems to read. And the first one, I'll start with a poem that is really dedicated to Ravi and my mom, Amma. In Tamil, mom is Amma, translates to Amma. And we would not be here if it were not for her. And I think so many of our own many passions in life really stem from her nurturing that in us. And so I start in a place of gratitude. Eternal address, Amma. Amma, your never-ending love blooms daily. Luminous marvels of springtime, melting snow, swelling streams, nature's perpetually inspiring palette. Fields bursting in boundless pigments, lush flora drenched in sunlight. Blossoms I have collected over time. Branches from meadows, indigo robins carry, holding precious findings, tiny beak, full of gratitude, each memory gently laid, positioned into thoughtful composition, whistling sacred hymns, harmony. Moksha, Kama, colliding, connecting fragment pieces into cohesive story that contains my dreams and my tears, samsara. The definition of samsara you have given me, O Amma. You've cradled within a perfect nest all that I am and hope to be. Amma, your love is transcendent, blooms daily, luminous marvels of springtime bursting in expansive fields full of saturated rainbows, plump bars of glistening gold, so close to your chest. Oh, Amma, I have collected your wisdom over a lifetime, and I am grateful. Time and time again, Amma, it is your never-ending love that is in fact home, sweet Om. Amma, my eternal address, AMMA, Amma. So the next poem I want to share is a poem that I wrote. It's one of the first poems that I actually put into my book, Luminous, when I was crafting it. And it is really, really comes from a personal place and stays raw in the heart. It is called Brewing Chai. How do you sip it? And I have my chai as we do our poetry tonight, in fact. Brewing chai. How do you sip it? I am a strong cup of chai, brewing beautifully, breathtaking bliss bare and beaming, simmering Indian spices unknown to most, warm milky brown, mingling with saffron, valuable threads from sacred Vedas, bubbling with tabla beats, leisurely, dripping, Sanskrit chants, fragrant aromas of echoing sitars, soulfully spinning resonant vibrations that cradle and rob me of sleep. I am 9 yards of golden silk, unraveling. As quietly as floating lotus petals at dusk, severely stabbed by social shards of glass, invisible to most, I am a fugitive unicorn, afraid the world will chop my luminous spiraling horn, pierce my tenuous aorta. My heart cries monsoons, and as I begin to evaporate, Tulu, Tulu. Namaste. Namaste, I am revived by tales of Mahatma Gandhi, of Sarojini Naidu. My spirit again finds swara and raga, promenading like a tribe of drunk elephants, trumpeting love from muscular trunks, but ever so fearful of ivory hunters. Searching to kill me for my tusks, I walk in this world with both celebration and anguish. With Amma's heartache on my back, my mother's sacrifices haunt me. With Appa's aged, wrinkled hands, my father's labors exhaust me, creases filled with undeserved struggle. I carry pain on my full Indian hips that ache. Each footstep, carrying my grandparents' voices, Ammama's bhajans, Tataji's mantras, long ago lost in this cruel world, each arm swinging with prayer for my children, my babies, extensions of my heart, already being robbed of sweet cardamom, bleeding saffron from endless oppression and the diaspora, pure sweet coconut water, tainted by infusive conquest. I am more than a red dot between my midnight eyes. I am more than your exotic versions of the Kama Sutra, more than curried meals cooked for your pleasure. My bindi bleeds daily. I am more than a red dot between midnight eyes. Bharatanatyam, once exhaling, now dancing, steam fading, bubbling tabla beats slowing, bellowing to Krishna as peaceful cows are crimsoned, fed to the overfed. I am a weak cup of chai. Masala finished brewing, lunar solar calendars ago, hoping, praying, pleading to be swiftly savored before my simmering Indian spices, unknown to most, stolen and monopolized by patriarchal colonialism. I am becoming bare and bleak, desperately grieving and hoping and yearning to heal, yearning to be savored for justice before I silently wash away by power-hungry, relentless, glutinous, hateful tides. I ask you, brewing chai, how do you sip it? So it's always a journey, right? To write a poem and then to be able to read it out loud. And I'm so grateful to Ravi, to all of the talented writers who've shared tonight, to be in community, to be able to listen and to be able to share from our hearts. So what a gift. The next poem I picked out, as one of my fellow writers tonight shared, it is Pride Month. And so I picked a poem that I wrote in my book, To Luminous, called Lavender Legends and Landscapes. Lavender, native to the old world, always was and forever is. Creating luscious legends and landscapes, lavender beautifully sings. LGBTQI, hold my humanity with yours. For rainbows live in each of us, red for life, orange for healing, yellow for the sun, green for nature, blue for art, purple for spirit, unapologetically breathing, birthing lavender legends and landscapes. We are just as the leaves of lavender, diverse in genus, in shape, in shade. We too are a spectrum. Shape and shade and gender and sexuality and dreams, lavender legends and landscapes stretching across history. Yesterday to now, Stonewall, Shepherd, Sasha Wall, fatally shot on April 1st in Jacksonville, Florida. Another too many beautiful trans women of color. Another heart violently stopped. No beating, beating in every way, beating Sasha's bones. Joining too many now underground. Struggles against intolerance, hatred, oppression, a world in which one too many of our brothers or sisters are murdered every 3 days, trans, a world in which half of the homeless youth population are LGBTQ, vibrant rainbows, rejected and denied, yet still rainbows that are beacons of light in our world. I wish it were not true. That half too many denied, too short of a ride, 4 times more likely to attempt suicide, too many tears, too many heartaches, my students, myself, all of us, because we are one, lingering in pain. But Amma always told me to remember, especially when grieving in moments of pain, to remember that the most beautiful rainbows appear because of storms, because of rain, light that is split into the arc of colors, exploding like holy rainbows, rainbows stretching across lavender landscapes, over the hearts of legends. We can feel the beating, and singing, all of us together, fiercely singing with pride. And I know we only have a bit of time here, so I'll stop. I had two more picked out, but I'm going to just read one because I want to make sure that there's time for community conversation as well with Ravi leading us today. So this poem is called Wings Spread Open, and I will leave us with a bit of joy and creative sparks that call each of us and bring us today in community as well. Wings spread open. Clock towers joyously chime. Unplugging to journey inward, I am stocked up on cough tea. Bundles of colored pens fill my hands with thirsty invitations from dusty sketchbooks. Parched spirit opens wide, calling on Indra to flow through me. I guzzle raging thunderstorms, let gentle rainfall marinate on my lips, my midnight hair tickling my toes, pulse navigating the way, listening to quadrants pointing towards the luminous sun. Creativity uncovers her eyes. Creativity, determined to find me after a protracted game of hide and seek. Ready or not, here I come, she trustingly bellows, and I awake from hibernation. Walk out of the shadows towards her voice, liberated from uncomfortable camouflaging, twisting myself into sundry pretzel positions to fit inside of a miniature closet, sandwiched between furniture and walls, bruising from being crushed and swaddled too tightly in curtains, breathing shallow and dreaming of air. Liberated, I walk towards her voice, unshackled. Free, stretching my limbs and Tarzan yodeling. Ah! Wearing a silver crescent smile, hibiscus garlands around my neck, reflecting the element of water, Swadhisthana, feeling a spark below my navel, I swallow my uncertainty. I buckle up with wings spread open, diving into the depth of prayer, the depth of my soul, invoking Varuna, I extend myself across Atlantic to my left, Indian to my right, ignite my inner muse, begin to flutter my wings. Ready or not, here I come, she repeats even louder. And this time, without hesitation, in a community of support, I respond, ready. Thank you so much, Ravi and all of the writers.
Thank you, Gigi. That was great. And thank you all. I'm adding everyone back here. Thank you all for a wonderful ISO break. I'm Ravi Shankar. That was Dr. Rajani Shankar Brown. And we've come to an end of another amazing collection of voices tonight. And as we always do, we kind of open it up for conversation at the end. And there's so many subjects we want to talk about. But kind of traditionally, we, especially because there are audience members who might not know where some of us are, I like to check in to see how things are going in different parts of the world. So maybe, Narissa, you could tell us how things are in the Philippines.
Hello, everyone. Well, here in the Philippines, we are still in an extended part of the pandemic, and we're just hoping that everyone gets vaccinated. Being vaccinated gives us so much hope. And we're also celebrating Pride. It's Pride Month during the pandemic, our second one. So, yeah, strange times, but also great times for being together in community in other venues aside from face to face.
Mm. And I know when we were talking before, you said that it was this moment of not just grieving, but a kind of a constant preparation for grief in some way.
Yes.
Yeah. Kyoko, you're in Kyoto, Japan.
Mhm.
How are things there?
We're in the state of emergency right now. That we started vaccinate the elderly a few weeks ago. We're very, very slow and behind in vaccination, but the speed is picking up. But for us, the biggest concern is the Olympics that is coming up in 50 days. And many of us are kind of stunned and incredulous that it's actually going to happen. And it will be something really, that unimaginable. And that I'm kind of concerned, not just what's going to happen during the event, but what will happen aftermath. But yeah, so and it's also so difficult to imagine what our near future is going to be like in a month and 2 months. I think it's the same everywhere in the world, but we're kind of holding our breath, I think. Yeah, right now.
Yeah. And Edwin, you're in Malaysia, and you said you're in your third lockdown now. Is that right?
Yep, right. Yeah. We did rather well initially, but over the last few months, things have really turned quite bad. And a couple of days ago, we almost reached 10,000 cases on a single day. So, yeah. So we're now in our third, what we call MCO. And, it's not easy. Vaccinations are being that campaign is going on. People are more receptive now. I think initially there was some reluctance towards vaccination, but there's been a lot of work getting people convinced that it's the right thing to do. And I'm glad I got my vaccination 2 weeks ago, at least my first dose. Yeah. Thank you.
And I know Gigi and Jazz are both in Florida. So in the U.S., I mean, we actually have done relatively a pretty good job of being vaccinated. I know Florida, though, lags a little bit here in New England. I think more than 50% of us are vaccinated. How are things in Florida with old DeSantis and gang?
I have described DeSantis as if George W. Bush and Donald Trump had a baby, and they made him governor. And I am, and I, for those of you in the U.S., I'm fairly convinced he will be the Republican nominee for president in the next cycle. And so brace yourselves. But no, I mean, it's life here is, at least down in Miami, is returning gradually to normal, I suppose. I mean, there's enough vaccination that the numbers have come down precipitously. And my hope for Japan is that there are 50 days. The vaccine does seem, these vaccines do seem to be incredibly effective, and the rate at which the numbers just reversed and came down has been encouraging, for lack of a better word. And so here, of course, we deal with vaccine hesitancy, which is our own. That's a whole other plague of kind of ignorance and idiocy in America. But yeah, no, things are in these parts for us are I'm happy to say much improved, and hopefully they'll continue to do that. And I don't know, Rajni, how are they up a little bit north?
Yeah, so I would say that I definitely I'm hopeful as the vaccine is come out and more people are getting it. But I am definitely seeing the magnitude of issues in terms of other issues connected, right, with the pandemic that's been exasperated. And so for me, my life's work, as my brother knows, is really around homelessness. And I'll tell you, it is just, we have so many families now, individuals that are the numbers are surging in communities across the U.S., but we have millions also at risk now for evictions, and then also getting vaccines, right, to our populations that are often vulnerable. That has also been a challenge, I think, in so many ways. So lots of work, I think, to do, and all of you around the world sharing today. I just sending, just love and positive energy, and trying to keep focused on hope, right? We all need that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways the pandemic certainly has cast a light again on the structural inequalities that exist in the U.S. and elsewhere. Certainly, I did want to talk about. I mean, in some ways the specter of the young. Gigi had poems. We had jazz reading with the baby monitor, and I wanted to start with Malachi. And tell us a little bit about this Malaysian millennial writing project. And I'm really curious because I feel like my own life is buffeted by some combination of cynicism and hope. And as Gigi said, hope is really important. But my students, I feel like they do have hope. They have a lot of anger. They feel like we've passed on a lot of issues they shouldn't have to deal with to them. And I'm always fascinated with what the young people have to say. So in Malaysia, Edwin, tell us about this book and this project and what's being expressed.
Right. Actually, last year, I organized a poetry writing project, and it was targeted at people who were 35 years and below. Earlier on, we had a book which I brought out called Malaysian Testament, and in that we had the established writers whose work I had put together. And I really felt that we needed to hear the voice of the younger writers who had less opportunity to actually publish their work. And so I invited young people to submit their poems. And I worked with 15 other writers and academics who helped in this selection process. We had about over 500 poems that were submitted, and eventually we came up with this volume of about 50 poems, about 30 writers. It was a good exercise, and we had very positive response from these young people, and also to get a take of what they see the world as, and especially writing in English, because English is very much a second language in Malaysia, and writing English does not get any kind of governmental support. So if we didn't have projects like this, we're not going to actually see writing being published. And in fact, when I started this project, a lot of the other age group writers said, "Hey, how about us?" So what we actually did was, I'm still working with the University of Nottingham, Malaysia, and we have now organized a national poetry writing competition, which is running at the moment, and it's open to all writers, whether published or emerging or those who have not published at all. No team, and basically I'm hoping that we will get a good response. We're just into our third week, and yesterday I think my research assistants told me that we have already about 300 poems and from about 100 writers. So it's very encouraging, and I really believe that writing English is something that is important, though we get very little support. At this point, actually, the fact that writing in English continues to thrive in this country despite a lot of ambivalence from the government, and we are not recognized as being part of the national canon. If you write in English, it is still a very marginalized position that writers have. Yeah, and in fact, I was really surprised when we had the Malaysian publishers this year coming up with these awards, and so this volume of poetry, Malchin Testament, actually was given the Malaysian Book Award for the English language category. First time I've seen that happen, so I'm really very pleased and very hopeful for Malaysian writing in English.
And I think we tend to forget. I mean, Malaysia is a country of what, 32 million or so, larger than Australia in terms of population. So, I'm just curious. Before we move on, Edwin, did you notice any kinds of what are the trends and themes for like young Malaysian people? Were there any issues that you found that many of them had writing in freedom of expression or? What were they writing about? What were they interested in?
What was interesting was that a lot of them were actually quite political in their writing. They were concerned with the way the country was moving. So it was good to see some really good work, which was political satire. There was also political consciousness. And the other thing that was interesting was how Malaysia, over the years, we are a very multicultural society. And again, identity was one of the issues that the writers were looking at themselves both as, from an ethnic point of view, and also we had a lot of biracial young writers who were examining that also. Yeah, so... And what I liked about the writing is that it had a very strong Malaysian perspective. They were using the English language as we know, Malaysian English is quite distinct from the other varieties. So it was good to see Malaysians writing in that mode. There's no mimicry. It was authentic.
Yeah.
And they were, the cultural element emerged, and that's what I think we really enjoyed about this. Very vibrant young writers.
Yeah. Thank you. I've spent a little time in KL and Kuala Lumpur, and I found it to be quite wonderful. So thank you, Edwin. Maybe we can actually, since we're talking about this idea of a translation, Kyoko, I'm very interested in the project Japan Society is putting out with the author that you've translated. Can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Right. I was so nervous in the beginning that the name's writer kind of disappeared. So yeah, thank you for asking that. Yeah, so that it's like 1 hour conversation organized by this translators collective, Strong Women Soft Power.
I love that name.
Yeah. And that so there are 3 videos so far on the Japan Foundation New York's literature series website. And the first one, so they always have the writer and the translator into English. And they also bring the third person as a moderator. And the moderator is also a translator or writer. And so in the first series, the first episode, Yu Miri, the author of I think she won the National Book Award, right? That Tokyo Ueno Station was interviewed by Morgan Giles. In the second episode, Sayaka Murata, the author of The Earthling, was interviewed by Jini Takemori. And the third episode, Nishi Kanako, interviewed by the Alison Powells. Yeah. So there are going to be more coming up. And I've interviewed for the 4th episode, I interviewed the Hiroko Oyamada and her translator, the David Boyd.
And what is Hiroki's work like, Kyoko?
Hiroko's work?
Yeah.
It's really fascinating that she has 2 books from the New Directions already. So one is titled The Factory, and the latest one, second one, is called The Hall. And both her works, they're both novellas, and it describes our everyday life and through this description of everyday life, we're taken to the strange land, strange kind of, almost absurd situation, but she calls that's the reality. She kind of, she calls it like, you are brought to the strange level by staring it too much. You pay attention so much to everyday life, and then you realize something is weird. So that's what she does. And so check it out. The factory.
Wow. It sounds kind of similar to that Russian principle of Ostrany, estrangement, right?
Yes.
By which you make the kind of the strange familiar and the familiar strange in some way. Oh, I can't wait to see that. So I want to watch all 4 episodes now. And this is at the Japan Society website, you said?
Yeah, Japan Foundation.
Oh, Japan Foundation. Japan
Foundation, New York. Yeah.
Right.
JFNY, New Jersey.
And I couldn't help but, we have the specter of young kids and jazz in your work. I couldn't help but notice that the circumstances of your life and this new being in your midst is kind of making a presence felt. Tell us about this 4th book that you're working on. What's happening with it? How deep into it are you? Where are you at?
I think it's done. It's a collection of poems, and it's called English as a Second Language and Other Poems, or The Usual Entertainment, which there's an epigraph that I cannot find the version of in the book. In Marguerite Yourcenar's Memoirs of Hadrian, the quote is different in every translation I've seen, but when I was at the tomb of Hadrian, the Castel Sant'Angelo, I can't remember the name right now, but there in Rome, they had a placard out, and there on the wall they have an inscription, and in front of it they had the translation, or maybe just below it, and it's from Marguerite Yourcenar's Memoirs of Hadrian, and it purports to be a poem that he actually wrote, which of course it probably isn't, but it's translated from then the Latin into French into English, but I cannot find this version anywhere else. But it's this wonderful epigraph where he said, I might have closed my document. I actually would like to read this for you all, because it's a very cool little it's a very modern sounding line that is attributed to Hadrian, and it goes, "Little lost and gentle soul, companion and guest of the body, get ready now to go down into colorless, arduous, and bare places where you will no longer have the usual entertainment." And I thought that was just remarkably modern and strange, and this sort of version of the soul that's like sort of temporarily inhabiting the body, and life itself is the usual entertainment. And so for a long time that was the working title of the book. But then
that's Hadrian, the Roman emperor from like 100 AD.
Yeah. I mean, that's what's so remarkable is that there's an inscription at the mausoleum of this, and this is the translation given. But I can't find it anywhere else. I can't find it in any text. So I don't even know how to kind of attribute it, because it was just there in Rome. And I didn't even take a picture, because I think
it's your translation, Jazz.
Yeah, I hope. I hope it is. But so I went to, but I was hoping to like cite it. Yeah. And I can't find a proper citation. And I thought that would be of interest, at least to this particular audience. But no, the book is, language features heavily, as it often does in my work, and but it's called English as a Second Language because of the ways in which having a child now and thinking about being a child of these immigrants, and Rajani's poems kind of evoked a lot of the those sensations and feelings of having these immigrant parents, and the strange way in which language is so kind of it's omnipresent in that life in a way that it isn't for other kinds of people. So the poems really kind of wrestle and grapple with. They tried, speaking of estrangement, the Russian notion, they try to estrange us from the ways in which we grow so accustomed to English, the English language, and hence poems like Americanistan and all these different kind of like trying to make everyone feel slightly off kilter. That's the idea.
Yeah. It's almost as if families have their own vernacular within the larger dialect of the immigrant experience in some way. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because we can bring in Gigi, who, for the title of your book, it's a kind of a neologism, right? It's an invented word,
It is.
luminous. Tell us about the origin and the meaning of that, and that first collection of poems, because I know you do a lot of social justice work and you do education work, and this is your first book of poetry. But what is Toluminous, and what are you trying to do with this book of poems?
Yeah, so I play with the idea of water and light. And so I take both of those and I think about, water and light being both forces in our world that can be destructive. You think about, tsunamis or hurricanes or, so many of the storms that have ravaged in ways similar to light, how light in some ways, even, talking about death with our homeless community in Florida because of heat, right? Because of sunlight. And yet at the same time, it is such healing forces, right? The water is a place of comfort. In many ways, our first landscape that we're born in, right, is fluid and water, moving in ways. And so I really play with that. I take kind of the South Indian linguistic roots of these words. And so I kind of talk about it in the intro, but Toluminous juxtaposes Tulu and luminous. And Tulu is a richly complex Sanskrit word which signifies connected with water. And its slang part is rising. And luminous, of course, is radiating and reflecting light. And so I just talk about how it is this kind of divine force, both hurtful and healing, the paradox, right? Playing with that. And then also other kind of fun meanings, the phonetic kind of breakdown of two luminous. I talk about this idea of kind of two luminous being, I have a son and a daughter, Valen Siddhartha and Ramila Sitara, my right and left ventricles, and then two luminous, TOO luminous. This idea of our global shared humanity and how when we come together and fiercely and radically love, we can create a world that is more luminous. And so it's this kind of play on a lot of different kinds of words. And so I had a lot of fun, coming up with that. And I wrote the book, actually, the way I have the poems, they're actually kind of strategically structured too, to kind of feel almost like a wave, where you have the wave of emotions from really feeling pain and despair to kind of hope, to moving back into pain and despair, but back at the end, ending on that note of hope. Hope being something that I do believe we cannot ever lose, right, in our world.
Thank you, Gigi. And tell us a little bit about the proceeds at Toluminous. You mentioned that it's going to help homeless youth in writing. What is that?
I'm so excited. So I do a lot of different projects that I founded and run. And so two of them, Acts of Kindness and Justice is one. And then I have a mentoring program called Hatters University that has 3 different levels, including Dream Big, scholars that we move into. And basically it's working with low-income students. Many of the students have experienced or are currently living in homelessness. We do a lot of different projects, the Acts of Kindness and Justice. I am so excited through this project. I'm working this summer with youth, mostly diverse youth, Black and Brown communities in our local community. We're going to actually be playing, I'm hoping actually I have to get with my brother to bring him in as a guest speaker for the youth, to help motivate them. And all of you are welcome. That would be awesome. But we're actually, working together to create poems. We're also working with a couple of other artists in town, a fabric artist, a photographer, and the kids are going to have a culminating showcase at the end of the summer. And so it's really great. And so the proceeds from Toluminous are helping with all of these projects. We also have 2 mural projects that the youth are working on. And so really just using the book as another way to, I think, make our world a better place, right? And so I'm grateful to be able to kind of, I know in the American, right, there's the saying, two birds, one stone, but I always change it. I say one lentil, two soups. It's a kinder way. That's my own. That's a Gigiism.
I like that.
Yes.
And you really are quite a performance poet, and I want to bring Narissa in because I know your work is kind of interdisciplinary. I know we saw one aspect of it, but you have done a lot of collaboration with other artists, right? Visual artists, and incorporating dance and performance into your poems. Can you talk about that practice a little bit, Narissa?
For a while now, I've been doing durational performance art, and my poetry is actually a talking to myself. But the durational art that I'm doing, both called Elegies and Infinite Gestures, and I'm nearing my 10th elegy right now, is they're actually the body presented as poetry but without language. And I have been meeting many other artists, so it's crossing a border without text but still is poetry. And I've been before the pandemic traveling and meeting people who are also expressing themselves in the same way with their body in duration. During the pandemic, performance artists, live artists, as myself and many others, what has been taken from us is that embodiment and that liveness with an audience. But then we also receive invitations to rethink embodiment and rethink audience participation. And so in art, the journey is here, and the journey is now, and we're redefining so many things, like ISOBEREAK as a poetry reading, right? And as a performance in this box. So we're all actually doing live performances. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that it's kind of liberating to think of art and poetry as being interconnected in this way. Well, I just look at the clock. I can't believe time has flown by. What a wonderful.
Can we ask you one quick question before you
Yes.
ask all of us a question? So how you have created this wonderful series, right? And it's just been a joy to be able to hear different writers and voices. And so how did you come up with this vision for the series? And also, what is your hope? At the end, I know you're archiving all of these, so they'll be available in a certain place or stationed somewhere for folks to revisit over time, or
Yeah, well, I mean, APWT has a conference that really migrates. It's a kind of movable feast that goes from one Asian city to another normally. And so we've had conferences in Bali, in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in Macau, in Guangzhou, in the Gold Coast, New Delhi. And we were meant to have the conference last year in Bangalore. And of course, that is exactly when the pandemic hit, and that travel was going to be rendered impossible. And so we just wanted to start this series as a way to still stay connected, even though we weren't going to be meeting in person. We didn't realize that it would continue to go for so long. And part of, because I live in the US, and what part of my great joy of being a member of APWT is the exposure and community that's brought me to Asian and Australian writers. And so I have a real investment in trying to bring some of those voices. I feel like American letters is by its very nature very insular. We always see that statistics that 3% of the books published in the US are translated, plus or minus maybe 0.5%. So any opportunity to kind of explode that canon and bring these voices is something that is very exciting to me indeed. So, and yes, as Gigi said, all of these readings are archived on YouTube. They're on the APW website. And a lot of people have come back who haven't been able to make it. Because as you can, some folks can attest to here, the challenging thing is finding a time that works for all of us from literally all over the globe. Right. So, but I think we managed to do that. Just in the interest of time, I think we do have to finish off, but the kind of ISOBEREAK tradition is to have the fortune cookie at the end of the meal. And so just go around and to have everyone leave us with some little bit of wisdom. What are you reading? What are you thinking about? What are you passionate about? What do you want us to be aware of, or doing, or interacting with? So we'll go around, and maybe just in the reverse order of the readers. So we'll have Gigi start us off this time, and we'll go backwards. Gigi, what would you like to leave us with?
Wow. Okay. So I just think this is just such a beautiful, just to be able to be in community, right, across oceans and come together, what a great space. And I think that, when you break open me as the fortune cookie, I'm going to come out and say for you all, I think that we have to hold on to hope. I've continued to kind of bring that up, but I think it's so important. But along with that, we need to mindfully take action in our own local communities and our world. Change does not just happen. It happens because we, the people, make it happen, right? And so I just would urge all of us to use our agency, the different talents that all of us have in communities, in ways to enrich, better the lives of others, and build a more just world, especially for our children and our youth.
Great. Thank you, Gigi.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Jazz.
It's funny. I think my personality often comes across as, and certainly my work has been called cynical at times, because of a certain kind of existential kind of bent to it. But I am actually temperamentally, well, at least in the interior, I am an optimist, and I think one thing that I feel very optimistic about is that. Through so much history, so many generations of people, the species, the cultures, in all their various forms, keep surviving. And this has been a very, very difficult time, and it's unlike anything any of us have experienced. But I do very much believe that the planet and human civilization will get to the other side of it. And I hope that all of us, when we get to that time, we pay our due respects to people who aren't with us, but that we enjoy ourselves, because life is short, and we've very much been, I think, taught that in the last year. And I hope we make the most of the kind of community and freedom of movement and well-being and health that I think is coming. It's a long road, but my heart goes out to all of you in lockdown and all these various places, and but it will end, and we will be okay.
Thank you, Jazz. Kyoko?
Yes, the optimism. Yeah, at the same time, I think this experience being really humbling, with advanced technology and sciences that we had thought that we could overcome, or this kind of, medieval things wouldn't happen to us, but it does, and it will. So, but we will go through it. I think that's the cycle. And the one of the things that I started doing in the early stage of the pandemics is to send a little booklet of poems in translation to my friends.
Aww.
Because so many, this is wonderful. We get to, look at this. This never happened before, from different parts of the world that we see each other. In fact, that the recording of, the Hiroko Yamada, she's based in Hiroshima. I was in Kyoto, and the David Boyd was in, North Carolina, and it was, hosted by the New Japan Foundation in New York, and the translator was based in London. So, this is wonderful. But so there's that aspect. But things matter. The text on the paper, and I thought it'll be. I wanted to have something arriving to me, and that I thought this might be a good way. So I think, and also it was wonderful to see, postal services around the world that they deliver things still And that during election, for instance, in the United States, I was really crossing fingers for the USPS. So that things and virtual both. Yep.
All right. And I agree. I mean, I've been having such a hankering for well-made objects instead of digital artifacts. So I definitely feel that. Narissa, how about you?
In many parts of the world, artists are considered non-essential, and that was felt. The tremors, the ripples of that were felt, especially during the pandemic. And in events like this, when people wake up or before they go to bed and they listen to us read our work, um, this kind of performance is already resistance against that concept of being non-essential, and we should just keep on doing it as a form of resistance and as a form of just standing up for the truth that we matter in this world, and we will keep on being important in this world. And to say this for generations like millennials, younger people, we have to stand up for that. We have to believe in that for the future, that we are important and we will survive. And even if our bodies do not survive this pandemic, this recording and what we are does, and art will find a way. That's what I want to say about that.
All right. Thank you. I love this hopeful optimism. Edwin. Oh, I think you're muted. Sorry.
Yeah, what I've kind of gathered over the last few months is how often we take things for granted, and suddenly, even going out of your house becomes something that you can't take for granted. I don't think I've stayed home so much. My dogs love it, but the other thing is, despite it all, just to be very hopeful. And I believe that we are very resilient. We will come through this. Yeah. But meanwhile, we just have to be strong. Yeah. Can be very depressing, but I'm still very hopeful about it. Yes. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I will just say, I mean, in the U.S. at least, last year, of course, we had the COVID pandemic, and then the response to what happened with George Floyd. And in my mind, those two things are interrelated in some way. And my hope is that the pandemic, I mean, we as humans are all susceptible to disease, and we are all united by that. And it seems to me that the other kinds of discrimination that exists institutionally and otherwise, in light of that, should be made absurd, and that, in fact, that we should, as Gigi said, use our will to advocate against it, and maybe we have reached a tipping point. It's always hard to say. I meant actually today to begin with the kind of welcome to nation, which they do in Australia, to talk about the native people who have this land, who lived on this land before the colonialists came in. But I just want to end today and thank you all. I see that we've had over the course of these 2 hours, people coming in and out. This has been the 10th edition of Isolation Break. We should be going on again in July. We'll probably have a Meridian showcase, and the plan is to, until the end of the year, until we can all reconvene again safely in person, to continue to do this, because I personally have found curating these that it's been an enormous lifeline. It's helped sustain me when a lot of times it's been very lonely during this pandemic. So I want to thank all of you for giving us your work and spending time with us. And I want to thank everyone that has been watching us today. I'm Ravi Shankar. This has been ISOBEREAK number 10 and APWT NYWW joint. See you all next time. Stay safe, stay inspired. Thank you all. good night and good morning.
Yes.
Bye.
Stay
Cheers.
well.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.